How's it going? And welcome to episode 218 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, and I am back, joined as always by Kevin Hastings. Thanks for all for listening and watching. As always, we are here a little bit earlier than normal on a Friday afternoon for me. Kevin, I think it's still morning for you. So bright and early, get out of bed. Let's talk some FAAB. How you doing?
Oh, great, Adam. Great to have you back, man. Hopefully no technical difficulties this week with the pro back behind the helm. So thank you so much for being here. How was your trip, man? That sounded like fun.
Before I get to that, I'm like, to be honest, I'm not the reason you don't have I've had my own technical difficulties almost every show leading up to that. So let's not count our chickens quite yet.
Distant past. Distant past.
Yeah. Can't look in the rearview mirror. So yeah, trip was great. Did a whole family trip up the coast of California, did the whole Disneyland thing. So that was fun. Drove up to, for those who know the area, Monterey, Half Moon Bay, Berkeley. Was this close to making the extra hour and a half drive up to West Sacramento for the A's in my home league. I had literally that weekend also made a trade for Brent Rooker. So I was really pushing to make it to the day game on Sunday up in Sac. But that did not happen. That's fine. Still a beautiful time in some beautiful places with some wonderful people. For those who don't know, I lived in Oakland, California for like 9 years. So I made some really strong connections and friendships out there. So luckily we're able to connect with a lot of them. And, as you grow up and you start, growing families and all that, all the people around you also do. So it was nice. All of our friends also have kids the same age as our kids. So it wasn't just us dragging our kids to meet our friends. They all had a blast as well, making new friends.
Nice. And as this episode drops, happy Father's Day to you, Adam, and those you were hanging out with on your trip, and those listening that pertains to as well.
Man, time is a flat. Like, I almost forgot that Sunday was Father's Day. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Oh man, yes.
Final round of the U.S. Open. That's my tradition.
There it is.
As I think it is with many.
Yeah, sure. Well, we don't, and you know what? I want to say there's no pink bats like equivalent in baseball. There needs to be a pink bat equivalent for Father's Day, because I love the pink bats.
We see a lot of kids on the field in the celebrations.
That's true.
And such. Yeah,
that's true. So we'll see. We'll watch for all of those different things throughout the course of the day on Sunday. But Kevin, man, we're recording early, but there is no shortage of news to talk about. Not to mention news that happened over the weekend that you and Joe didn't get to touch on. So let's dive right in. We're gonna kind of clump these together based not on timing, but based on kind of like the theme of the news. First, we are going to hit on about 4 or 5 things that happened over the weekend last FAAB period that you may have already considered, but we'll fly through these lightning round just to get them out of the way. Corbin Burns, you talked about this last week, but 15-day IL. Now Tommy John, and already being told that it's more than a 12-month recovery, which is not surprising. Even with the brace procedure, that's always tends to be more than 12, especially for a starting pitcher rather than a reliever. Obvious drop in all redrafts. I mean, and maybe even if you're in a dynasty league, this is an opportunity to sell to a rebuilding team for a win now piece. But that really doesn't affect what we're talking about today. What kind of hole is being filled by Corbin Burns being missing from the rotation for not only the near future, but the foreseeable future?
Yeah, we saw this coming. And so Joe Rico and I talked about this last week. And once again, thank you to Joe for joining me last week. But yes, for the most part, it's Ryan Nelson. And a lot of us were excited to get Ryan Nelson. He'd been pitching pretty well recently, and we had adapted a little bit that the Cincinnati's offense had been lackluster for lack of a better term, for much of this season. We're not afraid of visiting pitchers at Great American Small Park. Ryan Nelson goes and gets blown up for 7
Boom.
runs in
Yep.
3 innings. I think we toss that out because there is still availability with Ryan Nelson. He is 90% rostered in the main event, but only 30-something% in 12s. So I think that's just one of those outings you just toss out. And Ryan Nelson, in those leagues where available, I would be interested this week.
Gotcha. Well, away from the rotation here, another injury that happened over the weekend. Ryan Mountcastle hit the IL. He'll be out for at minimum 8, probably closer to 12 weeks with a strained hamstring. What kind? And actually, you know what? We'll just jump ahead for other Orioles news as they made some other activations. Right after that, Jordan Westburg and Cedric Mullins were activated from the IL a couple days later, with Heston Kjerstad being optioned to AAA and Emmanuel Rivera being designated for assignment. We also saw Kobe Mayo get the call recently as well. So a lot of moving parts happening in and around the Baltimore offensive side of the ball. Any other insights that you kind of see from this, and Mountcastle being out at least 8 weeks in most scenarios? If you don't have any IL spots, it's probably an easy drop.
Yeah, absolutely. With that amount of, that's 3/4 of the season we have left.
We're at that point of the season.
So yeah, absolutely. Westburg right back in the lineup on a daily basis. Cedric Mullins will play versus righties and even a lefty now and then. So if they were dropped in your leagues, which I don't think was many, we knew they were coming back fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. The one that might be available in shallower leagues is Mullins, and he's been very valuable this season, especially on the base paths.
So some things to look at in Baltimore there. Going up the highway a little bit to Philadelphia, Bryce Harper with a wrist injury was placed on the 10-day IL. And then MLB's Paul Casella was quoted as saying, after the season ended on October 9th, it took until December for the pain in Bryce Harper's wrist to completely go away. Of course, this was at the end of last year. And the Phillies believe it won't take that long with daily treatment this time around, but it's unclear just how long it will take. You got to be concerned not only with a wrist injury in general, especially for a power hitter or a hitter of any kind, really, that it'll not only, if it is a quick turnaround, that we kind of see what we kind of see from the production side of things, especially on the power side. Are you more concerned that this is a little bit more reminiscent of what we saw last year, or what's your take on Harper and how quickly we might be expecting him to return to form?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned here due to that quote. And, last season, I think the season prior as well, we came back from a relatively midterm IL stint or so. The power wasn't there for Bryce Harper when he came back. Now, when Bryce Harper comes back, he's in our lineups. In the meantime, Otto Kemp is who was brought up. In the meantime, hasn't really hit the ground running, but he's a nice in the minors, what would look like, a 15 to 20, both home run and stolen base guy over a full season, possibly. So in deeper leagues, Otto Kemp is a possibility, but hopefully that's short term. But yeah, I'm a little concerned about Bryce Harper, but it's not something very actionable. We're putting him in our lineups when he gets back.
Yeah, Otto Kemp has played every single day since getting called up, being either 7th or 8th, playing third base at first. Then they're like, no. We need Alec Baum back over at third base. So Otto Kemp being pretty much the everyday, or announced as the everyday first baseman until further notice. So I would expect at least the playing time to be there for Kemp moving forward until we see Bryce Harper back in action. They don't really have anybody else, I guess, that sticks out as being an option at first base. You think of first base as being the position where anybody can, that's where you just throw somebody, which, anybody except for Rafael Devers might agree with you. But there's nobody on that roster besides Alec Baum that stands out to me as an obvious, let's throw them at first base. I don't know about you. I don't know if you see anything.
No, not really. The first thing that would come to mind is like could Nick Castellanos play first base? But he's
Or
not
even
very good in
Schwarber.
right field.
Sure. Schwarber would have been, I guess, would be the quote
Yeah,
obvious answer, but because he's at least dabbled in it in the past, but obviously not an option for them because they would have done that by now.
exactly.
I would really appreciate the eligibility though, Phillies, if you could make that change. I could use a first baseman in a couple of leagues. One other thing, not an injury, but just a straight up goodbye. Craig Kimbrell made his his major league debut of the season, obviously not for his career, with the Atlanta organization. And then he was sent packing. I almost thought this was like hey, all right, let's get you in the uniform for like one inning or not even, and just so you can retire with Atlanta cap. But nope, they just DFA him, and then he signs a minor league deal with the Texas Rangers, who very similarly to Atlanta are having their own end of bullpen question marks. Chris Martin returned from the IL, but that it seems that the Rangers are reluctant to push him into the closer role. Robert Garcia seems to have it, but then he got blown up, but then he came back. We said this in the offseason when Kimbrell signed with Atlanta, like, is there a way for Kimbrell to actually find his way into the ninth inning? And lo and behold, we all got, I want to say excited. That's a strong word. But when he was called up by Atlanta, it was in the middle of Iglesias being blown up left and right, not having a 100% clear answer to who would take over between Lee or Pierce Johnson or somebody else. So it seemed like there was this very sliver of a path that Kimbrell could make to the ninth. Obviously, that's not happening in Atlanta. But will we see that sliver of a path make its way in Texas for Kimbrell?
So last week, Joe and I were laughing because I brought up you and I's conversation when he signed with Atlanta in the offseason, when we talked about this is the one guy that signing a AAA contract might be on our watch list for getting the ninth inning. It came to pass. A scoreless inning, although he did allow a couple of base runners. A guy got caught stealing and another one picked off. But scoreless inning and then sent packing, and now signed in Texas, minor league deal, as you said. And I again say, this is the one guy that Bruce Bochy, we could see this happen.
Right. It's the guy and the situation.
I'm more inclined hoping that with Chris Martin back, maybe those of us that have been on that train, finally see something, some ninth inning opportunities. But you cannot discount this with a guy like Kimbrell, especially going to a new team. One minor tweak, and we're seeing what we've seen these streaks of over the past couple of years when he's good, bad, good, bad. If he gets going good, Bruce Bochy, I think, will use him in the ninth inning.
Who closes out a game first at the major league level? Craig Kimbrell or David Robertson?
Craig Kimbrell.
All right. Robertson obviously still a free agent. Kind of the theory is
I think we see a retirement soon from both of them, but I think Robertson's might be imminent at this point.
Maybe. I like the guys over in the pen. Their theory is that he's just waiting to see who needs
the postseason run,
and he doesn't need to be a closer. He just wants to sign with the team who's going to make it has a chance at a ring because he wants the ring. Which more power to him. He should do that. But
Dodgers bullpen keeps losing guys because they need them as starters.
There you go. That's a pretty obvious one right there. All right.
Speaking of
the Dodgers, last one here of post or pre this week's news. Tony Gonsolin hits the IL for the Dodgers. Of course, a 15-day IL for pitchers with a right elbow injury. What else is there to say besides the fact that the Dodgers, all they can do are catch breaks? The team's too good for it to matter that much, but what kind of impact is Gonsolin missing in action going to have?
Well, the first step is we get Ben Kasparius back in the rotation. And there's obviously, I think, for many of us, interest there. that still only gives them 4 in the starting
Right.
rotation as of right now. I think Emmett Sheehan is being stretched out, and we could see him when he returns. He's set to come back. I think he pitched 4 innings in his last outing, is what I saw coming off a TJ that he had about 13 months ago. So we're getting in that time frame. We could see Emmett Sheehan soon, but the big one here is Kasperius getting back into the rotation, and that works out splendidly for those that picked him up as a ratios guy when he was dropped, when he left
Right.
the rotation. Joe and I talked about him in that category last week. Sometimes you get lucky and these guys move into a higher leverage spot.
Yeah, I was one of those the first time around. I grabbed Kasparis in a couple places before he got put in the rotation the first time around, just for those ratios. I mean, in the strikeouts, to be honest, as a reliever, he was still giving you those. I mean, the other question mark that comes about from this and all the other injuries that the Dodgers have, does this push Shohei Ohtani to start pitching sooner than later in a bulk inning kind of role where he's coming in during those bullpen games to help with the, ease the burden of the bullpen and obviously fill in the gaps of the rotation?
That they don't say that it has anything to do with this. However, they're spinning it as in his rehab is coming along so well.
Oh, it's so
But
convenient.
the
Yes.
latest news is we may see him before the All-Star break. Previously, we had been told it would be the All-Star break. Now they're saying, maybe it'll be a little earlier. And the All-Star break is only a month away.
You might be able to help me out with this. I'm blanking on what the rules are regarding being pulled. Like, can he stay in as the DH if he gets pulled as the pitcher? I feel like there's
I think he DHs the rest of the game in the games he starts because he doesn't throw a
logically
complete game every time.
that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I don't remember that either, but he doesn't come out of the game when he starts. No.
Yeah, he keeps. Yeah, all right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. When he was starting, when we had the DH rule. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna have to. I think there's some new because there's a lot of talk
Yeah.
or people saying he should be the closer. Like, what if Ohtani was the closer? And I had this weird feeling that there's a weird loophole to the whole DH pitcher thing at the back end of games, but that maybe doesn't apply to the front half of games. But
right.
I could be wrong on that.
Definitely something we're checking on.
All right. Well, that's all the news from the weekend prior, and we've got a whole lot more to talk about for this that's happened throughout this course of the week that will impact your FAAB considerations. And this seems like an obvious place to take our first break. All right, welcome back. We just went over all the news that you and Joe missed because it came in late before last Sunday, and now we're going to hit the news that has come in this week. We're going to bulk this together. First, we're going to start with some trades. We've got the most recent one that just came through earlier today, I believe. Aaron Savale from Milwaukee was traded to the Chicago White Sox. In return, first baseman Andrew Vaughn, former top pick overall, second overall pick in his draft class, traded to the Milwaukee Brewers. So let's start with Vaughn. What does he just come back at the major league level with Milwaukee and fill in any kind of holes that might be apparent there, or do you think that they continue to kind of rehab him and try to get him back up to his top prospect status that he once had?
Yeah, unfortunately, this could work out long term for those rostering Vaughn, but we don't know how long that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's in this lineup right now. I don't know if he's on the major league roster for a while. Now, a lot of these guys will get. Christian Yelich just missed a couple of games, and now he's back and DH'd on Thursday night. So that's kind of taking up a DH spot. Rhys Hoskins is healthy at the moment, playing first base. We've the experiment with Vaughn in the outfield in Chicago did not go well. So I think for now, we won't see him for a while, and it probably takes an injury before we do. However likely that might be in Milwaukee, we don't have a timeline. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think long term this could work out very well for Andrew Vaughn going forward for the rest of his career. But in the immediate future for fantasy managers, I
Nah.
he's a drop if you still have him.
I mean, that's the thing. Why do you still have him? At this
Yeah.
point, like he was a drop before he got demoted, just the way he had been playing, especially in 12 teamers.
He gave us that one little couple of weeks early in the year that we were getting pretty excited about. We're like, oh, maybe the Bad X isn't crazy, giving him almost 30 home runs. And yeah, it didn't last very long.
Not so much. But yeah, so I mean, if you are an Andrew Vaughn believer still, then this is the time to, I mean,
I might go looking for him in dynasty leagues right now.
sure.
If I can get him on the cheap.
As long as you can get him for the cheap. That's the point. All right. The other half of this, though, Aaron Savali, I would assume, enters the rotation for the Chicago White Sox when he was just demoted to the bullpen for the Brewers. He asked for a trade. As you said right before, he's like, hey, can I be traded? Sure. Here you go. You can, Milwaukee to Chicago's not that far of a drive. Just jump in a cab and get on down there. But you got to assume he's in the rotation for the White Sox and that they let him just run wild. Does it, because of that role, do you have any interest?
I don't. Unfortunately, he shows us signs from time to time, and we get excited. Ryan Bloomfield over at Bubba and the Bloom is notoriously a Savali guy, and even it doesn't sound like he's really into this at the moment. But you never know with a pitcher going to a new team. So it's worth keeping an eye on, but I don't have any interest at the moment.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right, another trade by default just happened. Lamont Wade Jr. was traded to the Angels for a player to be named later, and some moolah. I always love it when just like, can I just pay you for this player? Yeah, sure. All right, thank you. It's like an actual transaction that you just make at Target or something. And in return, to make room, Lamont Wade Jr. was activated for the Angels when Chris Taylor was placed on the IL. Wade Jr. playing outfield today in the lineup with Taylor Ward being getting an off day as well. What's Wade Jr.'s role for the Angels, and why did the Angels make this deal?
This is tough to see because he can be valuable to them, but he's going to be a utility guy. He can cover first base if Shanuel needs a day. He hasn't had one in almost a month. They could give him a day off at first base here and there. Yeah, Lamont could play the corner outfield spots. DH, Mike Trout, I think is full-time DH now. So I don't think there's a lot of playing time here. Probably similar to what we've seen the last couple of seasons in San Francisco.
Sure.
For Lamont Wade Jr. So it would be matchup dependent. Once we see a little more, no pun intended, for some other news that we have coming up.
I moved it. I just moved it up because it made sense. We can go for it.
Okay, so Christian Moore called up by the Angels, one of their top prospects, if not their top prospect, and so he's going to play. They didn't bring him up to not play, so that locks up an infield spot. I think the playing time for Lamont Wade Jr. is going to be pretty sporadic.
Sure. Moore already called up, like you said, already in the lineup on Friday, batting ninth, starting at second base for the Angels later on this evening. Yeah, I can't imagine that's a move. Christian Moore was somebody that a lot of people were taking flyers on, thinking he might break camp. But as we mentioned 2 weeks ago, and you might have talked about it with Joe as well, we are in Super 2 deadline territory. And so we are seeing, we're just about to get into that section here, a whole bunch of call-ups of some top prospects that can make a difference for you. And they're going to be a little bit cheaper for their major league teams, at least for the first couple years, because they're not going to get that arbitration early like anybody else who was called up earlier on in the season. So Christian Moore, timing is right in line with that, as well as with a couple of the other ones that we're going to talk about momentarily. But yeah, Christian Moore is not somebody you call up and play sporadically. So he'll be a big name or big price tag at the middle infield position in those who are really desperate for second base help.
Second base has been bad.
Yeah.
With, Joe, I think the word Joe used last week was atrocious. And other podcasts I hear people talking, anytime there's a second baseman available, there's a little added value there just because of how that position has worked out this season.
Sure. Unless you're playing in Yahoo and then literally everybody is available at second base still. Dominic Canzone, not a true call. I mean, he recalled up from Tacoma to join the Mariners this week with Leody Taveras designated for assignment. And that was sad. Though I was happy to see that happened at the beginning of the week. So I could pull whatever minimal playing time Taveras was still getting out of my lineups. Canzone renamed himself the other day with a just amazingly long shot in the extra. No, actually, that was the one. His home run, I think, was the one against Arizona where it forced extra innings. They were down 4. It was the Justin Martinez, we'll get to in a second, injury, where there was 2 outs. He had a strike on the next guy, and then Martinez took himself out later on in that Canzone hit the home run that tied the game. It was just, they ended up Mariners still lost the game, but the fact that was the was it Pav? No, who was it that hit the Josh Naylor hit the walk-off grand slam in that game? Don't ask me why. Oh, that's because I was on the West Coast. I was watching the late game because I was on the West Coast, and watching sports on the West Coast is the best. I'm sorry. I grew up on the East Coast. I lived on the West Coast. Watching sports on the West Coast is by far more pleasure. Like, it's just a better experience.
You're a morning person like I am. It's even better.
Oh, even better. Yeah, of course.
7 a.m. games and even some 6 a.m. games on Sundays, if they're starting at noon on the East Coast, are absolutely amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, Canzone, with the Mariners, that home run aside, interest level in general.
I'm interested. He's shown this power, and it may not show up to people if they're just really quickly glancing at his minor league. And, he's hit 20 home runs in a season one time. That was 2022. That was across 3 levels, 2 levels, actually. He hit them all at AA and AAA that year. But if you look at his slugging percentages in the minor leagues, Canzone, he gets a lot of extra base hits, and the fact that he already has that home run in spite of the low batting average, we're talking only 12 plate appearances. He already had 13 home runs this season in Tacoma with a 564 slugging percentage, as I was saying, and those over 500 and even 600 slugging percentages are pretty routine throughout the minors. I know he's 27 years old. We've seen him get shots in the past. It typically has come with a low batting average, 220s, 230s, exactly what he's projected for. But yeah, I think Canzone could be a decent source of power. Unfortunately, so far, we've seen 1 start in 3 games since this recall. So we got to start seeing more playing time. There may be a possibility for that here. Something that I was going to talk about later in the show, I'll bring it up right now. while we're talking Seattle. As good of a season as Dylan Moore had last season, as good as much as we talked about him in the offseason, and I think a lot of people were pretty excited early this season. Dylan Moore was getting a lot of playing time in Seattle, but with the Cole Young and some others being called up since May 24th, almost we're over 3 weeks. Dylan Moore has been strictly short side platoon again.
Mm-hmm.
So something to, and he's like 25% started in main events this week. I don't think everybody has noticed this, but that's something to keep an eye on. Dylan Moore's not getting playing time in Seattle, except against lefties. We love him against lefties. We also love that he was getting more playing time than that this season.
Canzone, for what it's worth, you're right. He's only started one of those 3. He's but has not been in the lineup. He has been in the lineup the other 2 opportunities that they've given him as well. That home run came on a day where he came in halfway through the game and still found his way into 3 at-bats with the home run in there as well. So we'll see if maybe that can lead to starting and then thus more at-bats rather than just pitch hit situations. All right, the big call up here, of course, with my Red Sox, they called up Roman Anthony with Waiver Abreu going to the IL. Anthony, obviously, again, also a subject to the Super 2 deadline, or the mysterious Super 2 deadline. You don't technically know when that is until the season ends, but would assume that they probably held on to that as long as possible. He's got to be playing every day, and going to be. He's not really even available in most places, as people like myself and a handful of leagues have been stashing him all season long, just hoping and hoping and hoping. And here you go, finally. But
I actually looked.
Yeah, what are the percentages?
100% rostered in main events, 99% rostered in online championships. So in your 12-team leagues, check.
Yeah. But less so about Roman Anthony because he's not available for you. But like I said, this is not a player you send back down unless he just falls off a cliff and struggle busts it. But it's going to impact the rest of the lineup for the Red Sox. Are you worried about any player that maybe you had been rostering in the future, either losing out on playing time or being traded into a different situation?
Well, as the Red Sox fan, I'm going to spin this back around to you, because there's a lot of ways this could go from the way I'm looking. Does this hurt Waiver Abreu when he returns? I forget the injury. It's not long term though, I don't believe.
No, I don't think so. But he missed a couple games before, and then they finally threw him on the IL.
Yeah, because unless Roman Anthony is really, really bad, he's not going back down.
Right.
Especially with, as you alluded to, the timing of this being to where even if the date doesn't work out exactly right, they can still manipulate it with a short stint at some point, right? They'll make sure, and they probably already have it calculated that they're good to go. So Roman Anthony's staying in the lineup, so we could see Waiver Abreu not get the playing time, and he was already sitting versus lefties. So we don't know what we'll see there. Could Ceddanne Rafaela lose some time? He's the better defensive center fielder, but that's a move I could see. Could Rafaela move back to shortstop? Trevor Story. I mean, from the outside looking in, I see a lot of possibilities. The most obvious to me is, even prior to this, but because we knew this was coming all season long and through the offseason, who are the Red Sox going to trade? Because these are all players that are too good to be sitting. They should get something for them.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get, especially all the rookies that they have called up between Christian Campbell, Marcelo Mayer, Roman Anthony. Obviously, you still have Rafaela and Abreu as well.
And
These young
Bregman's
guys.
rehab is coming along nicely. I mean, it's still relatively long term, but it
Abreu,
sounds like things are going well.
Abreu should be back next week. I mean, Cora said that he expects him back after the minimum stint as well. So that, like you said, it's not an injury we should be worried about long term. Bregman comes back. He obviously goes back to third. I mean, we've seen this with like random guys that have filled in on the corners for the Red Sox in the past couple of years. Abraham Toro, no matter how good he's playing right now, very easily could end up being the odd man out when there is a true crunch. Even though we kind of need the first baseman, I still have part of my brain hoping that they just push Roman Anthony, who doesn't really have a say in the matter because he doesn't have that contract signed, move him to first base. Let him, try that out. I thought they would do that with him in the minors with the expectation that, hey, this would create more of an opening, similarly to what they did with Christian Campbell, putting him in the outfield, knowing that they wanted him to be on the roster, second base being his primary position. Let's remember Mookie Betts started as a second baseman all those years ago, got moved to the outfield, and then moved back into the infield years and years later after that. So, I think Abraham Toro ends up being the odd man out, not tomorrow and not the day after, but when there is a true crunch, if they don't make kind of a trade that makes sense, Toro ends up being the guy that either gets DFA'd or gets moved into a bench role, and then we option back guys who still have options like Romy Gonzalez or even David Hamilton, or guys who still have options down into the minors. That's how I kind of see it going, panning out over the course leading up to the All-Star break. I think that's kind of a make or break for a lot of teams, including the Red Sox. We're not waiting until the deadline. I think the All-Star break is kind of that deadline for teams to whether or not they're actually competing, especially in the AL, never mind the AL East.
So you think Toro could be the odd guy out even before Bregman comes back?
Oh, I think the Bregman coming back will be the thing that kind of dictates that.
Okay. Yeah. So because Abraham Toro, since he began getting this regular playing time, which was May 24th, 70 plate appearances, 369, 4 home runs, 11 runs, 11 RBIs. And he's hit third the last 3 times Boston has faced a right-handed pitcher. So I'm excited about Abraham Toro. He's probably my favorite power pickup for this weekend, other than Roman Anthony if he's available, but he's not in any of my leagues.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like something, maybe not to this extreme, but we had a stint last year or the year before with Dom Smith was signed by the Red Sox. He was playing almost every day for a stretch and he was performing. And then all of a sudden he was DFA'd. So this is where my brain goes. Like this is.
Well, I assume that DFA or a trade or a move is definitely when Bregman comes back. But I really was hoping the young guys, most of them being, or at least Roman Anthony being an outfielder thus far in his career, would at least give us, we got, even with Bregman's, as I said, his rehab's going really well. We still have at least 3 or 4 weeks, I think, on Bregman. So
sure. And Toro might not be the guy because he's the only one that can really play first base. Again, going back to the position eligibility thing, it's just like, who else is the obvious play at first base? And there isn't one because the obvious play doesn't want to play the position. So you have to actually, force someone else's hand to try a new position that they're not used to, which typically goes poorly. We all know, we know this, at least in the off chance. You mentioned, Andrew, going from first to the outfield obviously is different than going from the outfield to first base, but there's not. So I could be dead wrong on that for that reason and that reason alone. And there's still plenty of middle infielders who have options that could just end up getting sent down. We don't have to DFA anybody. All right, well, let's move off my Red Sox now and go to another call up. This is another MLB debut, and this happened just yesterday. Jacob Mizorowski made his MLB debut for the Milwaukee Brewers, going 5 innings, coming out for the 6th inning. Obviously not getting it out there, but he did come back out. I'm not sure why, but he did. Pitched very well. Nice line. There was a lot of cloudiness as far as what kind of injury he might have sustained at the end of that game. Turns out he's ultimately going to be fine. Maybe some calf discomfort when it all came down to it. With Savali obviously not in that rotation anymore as well, you got to assume Mizorowski's up for, if not good, at least for a very long stint. How many triple-digit bids are you going to see for Jacob Mizorowski in your leagues? I'm not saying you're going to be part of it, but you would assume 100% of the bids are going to be triple digits and going to be made by teams who still have that kind of money left.
Right. But there we have two. We have two this week because Yuri Perez was not available in NFBC formats last week. So I think they're the two guys that I'm just looking at innings. 80 innings, 2024, or 97 innings total in 2024. He's already at almost 70 innings. I'm guessing 120 to 140 is what we're looking at. That only gives us, 60 innings the rest of the way. Now that does get us to, mid to late August, and then how do they spread him out? That's the only worry for me with either one of these guys. I'm more than happy to roster them, more than happy to put them in my lineups. My concern is how much money do I want to spend on these guys that I probably am not getting a full workload from the rest of the way. But yeah, it'll still be triple digits for both these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I won't be surprised to see Christian Moore get triple digit bids where he's in those leagues as well, where he's available. All right. Well, a lot of call ups, and I'm sure there'll be some more call ups over the weekend that we didn't get to. We'll talk about those next week. We'll see how they play into the FAAB bidding this week. We'll get into some more news about some activations, some IL stints. We're going to do that after this break. All right, Kevin, let's get into some activations. The Guardians first activated Lane Thomas off the 10-day IL. They optioned Will Wilson. I don't understand why people do that to their kids. To AAA Columbus. I also really appreciate it when a team has their AAA team so close to where they play major leagues. And Columbus is only about an hour and a half south of Cleveland. So that's nice for them. Lane Thomas back in the lineup for the Guardians, though. Is he available anywhere, though? I mean, and what kind of impact is his return making for whoever was taking the place?
Well, he's back near the top of the lineup. That is the good thing. I was a little interested because the price had come down in draft season. I didn't end up with him in very many spots because when he went, remember Washington was running like crazy last season, and especially early. And then when he was traded, the stolen base attempts almost went completely away for Lane Thomas. He's got 2 so far this season. Now he's only got 67 at bats. He's battled these injuries, and he does have a stolen base since this return, but it's just Cleveland just doesn't turn him loose like they did at one time. He also has a home run this past week. He's having a nice week. He started 0 for 14. Now he's having a decent week with a home run and a stolen base. I think where he is available, which he's only 26% rostered in 12s, I'm probably staying away unless I just can't find another option. He would be at the bottom of my waterfall if I need a guy.
Fair enough.
Because he will get the at-bats for the most part.
Yeah. Always good to have, that 4th or 5th or 6th option on there, especially this time of season as your FAAB starts winding down or getting to that point. All
And,
right.
and we're to the time of year when we have so many injuries that we might it's more likely that when we may be bidding on a specific position and we have to have one or we're taking a zero.
Exactly.
Add 4 or 5 more guys for $1 at the end of your waterfall. When you think it's good enough, add 4 or 5 more for $1, just to make sure you're getting somebody in
4
your
at
lineup.
bats is better than 0 because
Mhm.
at least something could happen in those 4 at bats where nothing's happening with a 0. Other activation here that I probably would have just missed. Nick Kurtz does come back from the IL for the A's with his hip injury, back in the lineup for West Sacramento. He wasn't really wowing anybody though before the injury. After his debut, obviously the talk of the town when he did get the call up. Where you did hold on to him, are you rushing to put him back in your lineup if you have the ability to do so over the weekend or for next week?
That's team dependent. That's a cop-out answer, but it depends. I'm not opposed to getting him back in my lineup. He could turn it around at any moment. You're not dropping him. You might have a roster crunch where he's your only option, because now that he's back, it means you have someone else you can drop and replace. But you might want to sit and take a look as well. It's so hard to tell with these young guys when they come up, especially the guys that we have seen high strikeout rates from in the past. And that was really the only concern with Nick Kurtz so far. It's kind of held him back a little bit, but yeah, I think if you have Nick Kurtz, we do have those 5 home runs in just a little over 100 plate appearances, but we do need to see that strikeout rate come down. The more I'm starting him. If he's on my roster, I'm starting him. And unless I just got really lucky and I also grabbed CES a couple of weeks ago before he came back and is on fire as he's come back. And he was probably not this week, but if you had him a week or two ago, CES was probably on your bench. You might swap him out till you see Nick Kurtz get going. But in most instances, I'm probably starting him.
Sure. He started Monday, so you could have gotten him back in your lineup for the first half, but hopefully you didn't because he only collected 1 hit in those 2 games that he played. So hopefully you did play a wait and see at the beginning of the week. He is in the starting lineup on Friday, batting 6th, playing first base. So expect to see him throughout the course of the weekend and, maybe wait and see. All right, we talked about the Baltimore activations already, Westbrook and Mullins, staking with the Athletics. Zach Geloff and Gio Urshela are beginning rehab assignments with AAA Las Vegas. I love that the A's AAA team is in Vegas, but the A's are not. I mean, are these guys? They go right back into the lineup once they come back. And if so, does this say Max Muncy, who's been better since his call back up, get back sent back down, or is there another move that you would expect in that infield for the A's?
No, I really think that if Max Muncy continues to perform, Gio Urshela might not get the playing time that we saw prior to the injury. I think that's a good possibility. But as far as Geloff is concerned, I expect him right back in there. And he hasn't been great, but we talked about second base being pretty shallow. In 15-team leagues, I've been starting Luis Arias at second base, at least middle infield in instances, and he's the one that is probably going to lose out with Geloff coming back. Because Jacob Wilson is the shortstop. He missed a couple of games due to injury, but Urias isn't moving over there. Brent Rooker is the DH. I think Urias is probably maybe not even just to the bench. He might be off the active roster.
Well, other guys who are trying to rehab, not doing a good job of doing it. couple of guys not even swinging bats yet. Jordan Alvarez, Chas McCormick, and Zach DeZenzo not swinging a bat yet. How long are you holding on to each one of these guys until you're just like, I can't do it anymore?
I think two of them are already gone.
Sure.
From most teams, and that's why I added this note, because it's so hard. But like, is there a consideration for dropping Alvarez at this point in a 12 if you have so many other injuries on your team, and you actually have timelines that are short term?
Man, if it wasn't,
I mean, Alvarez was one of my favorite draft picks this season. I even took him at like 8th in the first round in one league, but and I knew the risks, but the risks we knew about aren't what's come to pass. This hand thing, with Houston, I do get it. When there's a ton of swelling, X-rays don't always show things, but to wait so long to take another X-ray to find this out and still not swinging a bat after, when they told us they had found that, we thought we might see him in a couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks, more than a couple of weeks, and he's still not even swinging a bat. I stare at him every week, and 3 weeks ago, he was still on the IL, but I threw him in a lineup expecting him to come back on Tuesday.
Exactly. The words that you're getting out of the Astros are so confusing, because it's like they make it sound like he could be back any minute now, but then also he's also not touching baseball bats.
And that's the worry. Now that it doesn't sound imminent, if we drop him, he's in the lineup Monday. And so I don't think I don't think I can, but it is worth considering at this point, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you have to make these tough decisions sometimes, and it's not the same degree, but like earlier in the season, I found myself having to drop Colton Cowser because I just had to.
Yep.
I knew that he'd be back at some point, but I didn't know how long. At one point, desperate, didn't want to take any more zeros at that position. So I mean, if you still have that flexibility, or if things are breaking your way, great, fine. But if you feel like you're in a pinch, even if you did draft them at the 8th overall pick in a draft, we're already at a point in the season. Once you hit June, nobody's untouchable for being dropped. Especially if you just don't know what's going on. You can always bid on them. That's the thing. If you drop them, you can always.
If you drop him, you have to bid on him next week. Somebody's picking him up.
Because if you drop him, that's when he comes back. That's
it's still a good point. If you have a roster crunch and a lot of money, that can be your move.
Yeah.
You're not going to use him this week.
All right, another now we get into the IL stints, Kevin. And we'll get right into it. Zebby Matthews has a right shoulder injury. He was placed on the 15-day IL. Overall thoughts on Minnesota brought back Simeon Woods Richardson. He got blown up. David Festa looked a little bit better in his latest outing, but Minnesota not looking that great from a starting pitching, from a rotation standpoint. Pablo Lopez obviously on the IL already as well. How long do you hold on to Zebby at this point? We are all excited for him to get the call back up as well. And how much can we really trust Minnesota at this point when it comes to starters?
I think if you were stashing Zebby prior to this call up, you hopefully are still in a position where you can hold for a little bit until we get a more definitive timeline here. But for the moment, it's David Festa. I'm a big David Festa fan, and I am struggling. I roster him on several teams. There is some availability still for those that want to add him at Cincinnati and at home versus Milwaukee for a 2-step this week. Are you starting David Festa in a 15 and or a 12? Are they different?
I traded David Festa finally last week. He was part of that Brent Rooker trade that I made over the weekend.
Oh, nice.
And so I this was my concern with Festa from the get-go, and it had less to do with Festa and it had more to do with the Twins. Once they let one of their young starters, Sebby Matthews, go deep into a game, he gets hurt. And so I just have this inkling that they're just not going to do that with anybody else. Festa went 5, I believe, in his last start. So it's not like he can't do it, but I don't.
He went 6, but that was Texas, and they're the worst offensive baseball. They're worse than the Rockies. Yeah.
And so I just don't trust the Twins to continue to let them, run wild and get the innings. So I just don't think that the upside is that great now. 2 starts. I mean, going into Great America's Small Park isn't that big of a deal, as we just talked about earlier in the show, because Cincinnati, like Colorado, like the Rockies, even in Colorado, aren't doing enough with their bats to make the ballpark factors really play that much of a role. Milwaukee's not great either. I don't know. The strikeout upside is pretty good. Maybe I am starting. Maybe I just talked myself into it. I just don't trust it.
Yeah. The hope is that it wasn't just because it was Texas, because they did let him face the top of the lineup in the 6th inning. 22 batters faced. Prior to that, the one other start in June and the 3 that he made in April, 18 or 19 batters. Right? He might face the leadoff hitter the 3rd time, and that was it. He's not facing the guys with power a 3rd time. So hopefully we can at least get 5 innings out of him. If we're not going to get 5 innings out of him, that's a big problem.
I mean, the thing with Festa, the strikeouts are there no matter what, but his control hasn't been consistent. And so he has to be really effective to get through 5 innings while only facing 18, 19 batters. You know what I mean? So it's like he's not. I mean, he's just not. He hasn't been effective or efficient, excuse me. So I don't know. Again, I don't necessarily. The innings will be there over a 2-star week, sure, but he might get 8, 9 innings, but will he get 1 win or even qualify for said win?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's Festa. That it's his. He's.
Oh yeah.
We have a set 5-man rotation in Minnesota now, and until the guys that are injured start coming back, I think we're done worrying about who's the next guy up in Minnesota. We're pretty set with what we got, and yeah, I think in spite of what Cincinnati did to who was it we were talking about earlier, that they actually did blow a guy up that had been pitching well. Yeah, I think I'm throwing him out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, another IL stint here on the offensive side. Matt Chapman for San Francisco got placed on the 10-day IL. He's going to see a hand specialist on Friday. So we already know that this is not going to be the minimum stay. He hasn't even seen the specialist yet. Friday being today as we're recording this. Haven't seen an update from that. We probably won't until either tonight or Saturday. It's a possibility we don't hear updates on that until Monday over the week after the weekend passes. But overall implications of Matt Chapman missing out at the hot corner for San Francisco for the foreseeable future.
Looks like Casey Smith is going to be a beneficiary here.
We've seen this show before.
What's that?
We've seen this show before as well.
Yeah, exactly. And he was at pretty sporadic playing time, filling in at first base and even a time or 2 at shortstop. But he's had these starts all 3 games since the injury to Matt Chapman, and that's probably what we see for the foreseeable future here. Yeah, I think it's that simple.
Yeah. All right. So you need the third base help.
This is a good point. The wild card I didn't write down in the outline, Adam. I think is probably the biggest prospect left that we're waiting on now that we've seen Roman Anthony.
Yeah,
it's Bryce Eldridge. That could shuffle things around because he plays the other corner. And Dom Smith, doing what Dom Smith does when he first gets to a team. He's gotten us excited, and we'll see how that pans out. But, yeah, Bryce Eldridge is ready, it appears.
So well, I don't think we get that call up over the weekend, so we'll talk about him next week probably
There you go.
as well. All right, we've got some more IL spots. We'll hit this last one before we take another break. Kodai Senga hits the IL with a strained hamstring. Overall, for the Mets, what's this looking like for their rotation for the next week or two?
Yeah, well, last week we were talking about who's going to be out of the rotation as a couple of guys got healthy, and I think this makes my belief and some others was I thought it most likely would be David Peterson. It also could have been Tyler McGill, a couple of other options, but they're safe now.
Sure,
It's that easy.
Similar to the Twins situation to an extent.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we've got a couple other injuries to talk about and some just updates on old injuries. And we'll get to those after this next break. All right, let's talk about some injuries that we already knew about, or at least one of them. An update, Aaron Nola, he has a stress reaction in his rib. He won't throw for a couple weeks, at least 2, which means even if he's cleared after 2 weeks, it's going to take him a while to rehab that back and get back to form. Of course, the Phillies have Abel already in the rotation. You expect him to keep running, but then you also have Andrew Painter kind of waiting in the wings, except Andrew Painter's been terrible. And so I'm not sure what they want to do there, or if they just maybe they like what they see. They're just the lines haven't looked good. I don't know. What are you looking at in Philadelphia as far as starting pitching options?
Yeah, so far so good for Mick Abel, and that's good for the Phillies because, as you brought up, in the offseason they told us we would probably see Andrew Painter, if not early July, right after the All-Star break. That was their plan coming into the season. He's not performing, so Mick Abel's holding down the fort right now, and probably keeps his job as long as he continues to perform.
I mean, he's performing, and he's performing admirably.
Exactly.
And everybody who's grabbed him when they could and stashed him after he was sent down after that spot start, great, lucky you. But those who dropped him and then somebody else was able to pick him up before his next call up, you're probably riding this wave as long as possible.
Yeah, the Cubs got to him a little bit, but the Cubs are getting to everybody these days.
Except today when I needed them to. Cade Horton pitched great, except they couldn't score any runs for him. Cubs. All right. Anyway, that Cub rant was for Sarah.
I said last week I would start absolutely anybody against the Texas Rangers right now. That's the way I stream my pitchers, and they put up 16 runs last night.
Yeah,
so it burns you once in a while.
All right. Well, we talked about my Red Sox. Unfortunately, we got to talk about your Royals, but on a negative level here, Kevin. Cole Reagans hits the IL again with a shoulder strain this time. Again, it was a shoulder injury prior as well. Now it's a shoulder strain officially. Waiting on additional tests. He's going to get a second opinion next week. I think it's scheduled for Tuesday, I think is what I saw. So we got to wait on that. But, whenever you hear second opinion, you never feel good about it because that means the first opinion was bad. And so waiting on those tests to see what the severity is, but surgery is not off the table. What are you doing with Cole moving forward this week? At least this weekend.
If we don't hear by Sunday night, it's going to be a really tough decision. I think if you're in a roster crunch, that makes the decision for you. But we're already being told before these tests, it's a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks. Then, with the building back up, with his injury history, which I kind of downplay a little bit. It's not really two Tommy Johns, but just the things he's had this year that weren't arm related. But yeah. It's going to be tough. I'm trying to hold if I can, and in most spots I probably could, but it doesn't sound good. If they stick with the 4 to 6 weeks, I might hold him till I absolutely have to drop. But any news worse than that, At this point, even the 4 to 6 weeks, we're almost halfway through the season.
Sure. I mean, does this do anything more than just solidify Noah Cameron's spot in the rotation?
Not for now. Now Noah Cameron, the underlying skills didn't look so great, even when he had done something only Fernando Valenzuela had done to begin his career in the past, right?
Mhm.
So, but the underlying numbers weren't there. We knew regression was coming. It came. It came pretty big last outing, and he doesn't have a great schedule coming up. So, but for now, it does solidify Noah Cameron. And then I'm drawing a blank on my own team really quickly here. We do have somebody. Alec Marsh, I think, is building back up, and we may see back soon. So that's probably their backup plan. If he was to the 60-day IL, but I don't think it was announced he was out for the season. So he would be available, here in a couple of weeks, eligible. And
He should be
so
eligible
that's something I'm
already.
keeping an eye on.
I mean, he was put up.
Oh, yeah, because that was a transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was
I
put
can't
on the
find
IL
my
from
news on him.
the 24th of
The beginning of the season.
March. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Kyle Wright, man? We're all
he's working out there. I quit bringing him up because I was excited about seeing him this season. And we keep hearing a little bit of news, but not a lot of news, and just enough to keep me excited. And let me see what his rehab numbers are so far this season. He has thrown 16 innings so far. Very uneventful. Doesn't appear the command is there, which we would expect for someone who hasn't, pitched it for 2 seasons. But yeah, I'm still keeping an eye on Kyle Wright as well. I just quit bringing him up. We quit getting very much news on him.
fair. But yeah, he is actively rehabbing.
For now, it's Noah Cameron.
Yeah,
if he can right the ship, and he's not going to be as good as he was those first 5 starts, but if he can be anywhere close to that, he'll stick for a while.
there you go. Well, somebody who's not sticking anywhere is Ryan Weathers. He gets placed on the 60-day IL with a left lat strain. You mentioned obviously the return of Yuri Perez and obviously Sandy Alcantara coming back earlier on in the season as well. What's Miami doing at this stage with their rotation, especially with Weathers gone, back, gone again?
Yeah, even with Yuri, that leaves them one short at the moment. I'm curious to see who Jason has going for them in these. He has Valente Balazzo pitching on Saturday and then sticking in the rotation. He's at Washington on Saturday. I will keep tabs on that and definitely check to see what Nick has to say. But he'd be pitching against Philadelphia this upcoming week, and that's still. I know they've had their ups and downs, and they're not always the juggernaut we expect them. And Bryce Harper's on the IL, but I'm still not throwing somebody out versus the Phillies as a streamer.
Yeah, especially outside of Miami as well.
Right.
All right. Well, let's fly through these last couple here. I added this one to the last second because there's not really much to say except Jackson Jobe. If you haven't noted, if you haven't seen the news, is having TJ. Is having. I don't think I can put that in the past tense yet. I don't think he's actually gone under the knife, but he'll be out obviously the rest of 2025 and the majority, if not the entirety of 2026, as he recovers from that surgery. I mean, is there anything in Detroit that this opens up? I mean, he's already been on the IL for a little bit, so there's probably not much that you can really glean from this news.
Other than that, if you were holding, no longer a reason to.
Sure. Another UCL sprain, not officially Tommy John yet, but we talked about it earlier. Justin Martinez of the Arizona Diamondbacks, he was placed in the IL with that UCL sprain. He'll be out 12 to 13 months. So that is the entirety of 2023 and at least probably until the All-Star break of 2026. That is if he does return in that timeline. If he has true Tommy John, probably out the majority, if not the entirety of 2026 as well. Maybe he has the brace procedure. Maybe he has some other procedure that just does keep him out for 12 to 13, and we see him at the end of next year. Either way, easy drop here. Shelby Miller, I'm assuming, is taking over the closer role for Arizona. But is there anybody else in the bullpen or coming up that you kind of took notice on in Arizona that could take over that spot?
Jalen Beeks is there. We've seen him have great stretches throughout his career, typically as a setup guy. But if need be, I think he could pitch tonight. There's been speculation on Ryan Thompson throughout this season. Kevin Ginkel was recalled, so those are options. But I think it's Shelby Miller, and he's available. He's even available in over 25% of main events because of the recent events with Martinez returning. Shelby Miller was dropped in some spots, so I think he's the number one the number one save guy to pick up this week.
There you go. And last thing here, unless something broke while we've been recording and we've already gone over the hour mark and we're not done with the news, Kevin. Shota Imanaga with a hamstring injury. He's beginning a rehab assignment. He pitched on Monday with the Arizona Complex League game, and he felt great. Said he felt great physically, and he's going to pitch again Saturday for us recording today on Friday. Of course, that is tomorrow. By the time you're listening to this, that will already happen. So go check the box score and see what he did there. But, you know, the Cubs, as good as their offense is, as scary as their offense is that you're talking about, could probably like to have Imanaga back in their rotation. When he does return, who does this kick out?
In my mind, it's got to be Ben Brown.
God,
Earlier this season when he got sent down and I dropped him in a couple of leagues, it was like the first week of the season. I dropped him where I had drafted him, and then he got brought right back up, and I was upset. And I tried to bid on him, like you say, you can always bid on him again. I was too conservative, and I didn't get him back. And now I'm so thankful because he just hasn't been good. Couple of bright spots that get us excited. Okay, maybe he is, but I think Ben Brown will be the odd guy out here. We haven't seen a lot of Cade Horton yet, so possibly, but it most definitely is going to be, in my mind, Brown or Horton, whoever is performing least well when Imanaga is actually ready.
Horton's definitely been the better of the two since the time of his call up. So I expect Horton to stay. Crossing my fingers because I've got more exposure to him than Ben Brown.
Yeah, and I can see some Cubs fans, saying, why not Colin Ray, who hasn't been he's actually been bad in 3 of his last 4 starts after being phenomenal to start the season. But I think they would rather have the veteran in this lineup when the team is going as well in the rotation, when the team is going as well as it is, especially when they're not pitching lights out. Colin Ray, I think, is fairly safe, but doesn't take many more 6-run outings to be the guy that gets sent packing.
I guess the other question is whether or not anybody gets packing altogether, or if they just get moved into a bulk relief or even a high leverage role. Ben Brown could very well flourish in that type of a role.
They got Chris Flexen in that spot.
It's true. You do have, so they're fine. They're fine. All right. Well, with all of that in mind and anything else, there's a lot of news that we just went over, and I'm sure there will be more things breaking as we continue to record and throughout the course of the weekend. So make sure you're checking all your news outlets. Kevin, let's here we go. We got an update. Torey Livola did say that Justin Martinez is expected to, of course he gets caught up. He gets cut off, but anyway, Torey Livola did have an update on Justin Martinez, and Paul Blackburn is slotting into the rotation for for the Mets with the loss of Kodai Senga, at least in the short term, as they wait on the returns of their other missing pieces. So good. That's not even major news. That's just updates to things we already talked about. So that's nice. For all the other updates on news, you should be listening to the First Pitch podcast with Jake Crumpler and Trevor Huth over the course of the weekend and every single day. And Nick Pollock has you covered on all things starting pitching with the Plus Pitch podcast every weekday morning. You can watch him do it live right on playback.tv/pitcherlist. Or you can listen to it wherever you're listening to podcasts, or you can watch them on YouTube, like you may be, like the four of you that are out there watching us right now. So keep an eye on all those for all the updated news and items. Now we can finally get to these recommendations, Kevin, and we're going to do that after this break. All right, let's get right into actual recommendations. And who knows, it may change drastically by the time Sunday rolls around. But as of right now, Friday afternoon, my time, East Coast time, still Friday. Oh, we've crossed into afternoon for you, right? We're 5 hours.
Not quite. 11:30.
Oh, you're still morning. All right. Good morning. Let's see if we can get these recommendations before the afternoon hits for you. Power category to start us off, Kevin. Home runs, RBIs. Who's out there, and who do you want?
Yeah, we talked extensively about Abraham Toro. He's my favorite. I am a little more concerned after your analysis, but I think we get playing time until Bregman returns, but we hashed all that out. Josh Bell, we've been talking about for a couple weeks now. I dropped him. Everybody that listens to us knows I was all about Josh Bell in the offseason. Dropped him in many spots, got him back in most of those spots. He's not doing anything outstanding, but he is doing the Josh Bell pace now. Now he's performing at a pace of that 20-70-70 we talked about. Batting average a little lower. He's in the 230 range, even in recent weeks, not that 250. I still think he can get back to that point. Joe Adell, highly rostered now, but still available in 20% of online championships. So worth bringing up because he's been on absolute fire. Yes, we've seen this from him in the past, but that still with his pedigree, that there's a chance that he just takes off still at any point. And he's been really, really good as of late. A couple of deep league plays here because of their short side platoon guys, highly available. Andres Chaparro in Washington. You can't use them first half of the week, but at the next weekend, 2 of 3 versus left-handed starting pitching. Same thing for David Fry in Cleveland. I used David Fry in a couple of leagues the first half of this week because Cleveland they faced 4 lefties in a row, and David Fry does not have a hit, but it's like 11 plate appearances. So I still think David Fry in deep leagues for the weekend is a possibility.
All right. Well, a lot more power options than you normally give me, Kevin. So I can appreciate that fact, even if they're not all available in all of my leagues. But now I need some speed to go along with it. And it seems as though, in the leagues where I am, I've gotten to a point where in a couple of my leagues, I am flush with speed. Top of my league, good 2 to 5 or even 7 stolen bases above the second place team. And I'm starting to get to a point where I'm thinking about dropping my rabbits that have gotten me there. Obviously the Chandler Simpsons are easy choice in the past, but even the Caballeros, even with the added roster flexibility, if that's all they're giving me, I'm in a position in those leagues to make some drops. So I think you're going to see some teams in your leagues start making these decisions as well. When you have those one-dimensional players that got you where you are, bank what you've got, and then say thank you for all the fish, and then be on your merry way. So keep an eye on the drops for speed in the coming weeks. If you get more teams that are in the situation that I find myself in a couple of my leagues, and see if they start dropping those players for more options if you are at the bottom half of the stolen base, or if the stolen bases is an area in which you can make up more ground than other categories, you might see some more availability from guys that we're not talking about in this category in your specific leagues. But with that being said, who is more readily available in this category in runs and stolen bases, Kevin, that you might be looking at?
It's a great point to bring up. A couple of guys, say just like Chaparro for Washington, Jacob Young. I was excited about him in the offseason, not getting the playing time I expected with his defense. Short side platoon guy. Also on my Rosario short side platoon. Just like Chaparro, they get those two lefties over the weekend. But the guy, I'm so glad you brought that up about you might be in the position to start dropping the rabbits, but you don't necessarily want to replace them with a guy that's 0 stolen bases, right? But you want them to contribute other places, right? Tyler Freeman in Colorado, 63% rostered in 15s, only 6% in 12s, hitting right around 300 and projected to hit close to 300. Moderate power, not a ton of it, but not a 0 either. And he's got like 5 stolen bases the last couple of weeks. And it's getting hot in Colorado. So we're going to start seeing the ball fly out of Coors Field. It's supposed to be 100 degrees the next couple of weekends. I know some days it drops back into the 80s. Doesn't stay 100 degrees there like it does in Texas, but we're getting hot, humid weather in Colorado. We're going to start seeing home runs from guys like Tyler Freeman, who are also giving us stolen bases. And he's perfect to put in your lineup when you're replacing a Caballero or something, because you're still getting some stolen bases in addition to improving in the other categories. You're on mute.
Even if you're at the top of your league, like I was talking about, you're probably not. You probably don't have a 20 stolen base lead over second. So there's still a possibility that you could lose a point or two in the next couple weeks or months in that category. You just want to tread water in that situation. So yes, to your point, Tyler Freeman, good replacement in that realm. And of course, if you need it, he's not a 0, so he can replace somebody who's giving you 0 stolen bases if that's what you're in need for. All right, some opportunity ahead for this coming week. There's a whole bunch of teams that have a 7-game work week. Nobody has 5, but the 7-game teams include Baltimore, Yankees, Tampa Bay, the Athletics, Houston, the Angels, Miami, Philadelphia, Washington, Colorado, the Dodgers, and San Diego. Colorado is away for half of those, though, for 4 at Washington, but they host Arizona for 3. Cincinnati is hosting Minnesota for 3, but then on the road against St. Louis. So as Nick has coined it, the red carpet for all the St. Louis starters at the end of next week. Tampa Bay, we're seeing, the ball fly out, and you talk about warming up and humidity in an open air stadium in Tampa. There we go. All at home all week long, 4 games versus Baltimore. Detroit comes in for 3 at the end. And West Sacramento is hosting 7 games of their own, with the Athletics hosting Houston Astros for 4, and then Cleveland comes in over the weekend for 3. So with all that and anything else you want to consider, anybody have a positive or negative opportunity ahead of themselves for the coming week we should make note of?
Yeah, I brought it up. Dylan Moore is back to short side platoon only. So take that into account. We're only putting him in our lineups. He's much more viable in daily, of course, and then even in FBC when we can set our hitting lineups for just half the week. Mm-hmm. In full weekly lineup leagues, Dylan Moore is going to be really tough to continue to roster, unfortunately. But then my favorite schedule for the week, and it is one of the 7-game schedules. Yes, the minor league ballparks are great weeks. We got 14 games between the two, but what I think is great is if we look at Houston, they get 4 of those games in West Sacramento, and then go to Anaheim for 3. So they have a full 7-game week as well. And there's been a little movement. There's not a whole lot, but with Jordan Alvarez out, we're seeing the catchers take over the DH duties in Houston quite a bit. So in a deeper league, if you need a second catcher, Victor Caratini is viable right now. Him and Yainer Diaz. Yainer Diaz is playing almost every day now, working his way back to that after missing a game here and there. And Victor Caratini even DHing many of the days that he is not catching. Jacob Melton. I thought about putting him in the stolen base category. Not really taken off so far, but he hasn't been bad either. And he wasn't picked up everywhere. He was available in NFBC leagues last week and was a pretty popular player of discussion, but wasn't grabbed everywhere. Still has some availability. So yeah, check just about anything in the Houston lineup, and then the Athletics. We talked about Geloff coming back soon. At Tampa, especially the players there, just double check these whole groups of teams because there's not anybody that's widely available, but these guys have all these teams have players that are highly rostered, but maybe not quite 100%. So I'm looking more at team situations this week and just checking on a whole bunch of players because it's not just Colorado where it's heating up. It's getting hot everywhere. You see a guy, one extra day of playing time that you foresee for a week as it's heating up is a lot of chances for some more power.
Yeah, remember the entire East Coast is extremely humid. It's not just the South. It's just not Florida.
Right.
Fenway already plays up, but Boston, living in Massachusetts, my whole young life, I know how humid it gets there. And so that whole
St. Louis is one I always bring up that I think is underrated. People don't realize how hot and humid it gets in St. Louis in the summer, and it's considered probably neutral, maybe leaning pitcher friendly. But when it gets hot and humid, that ball starts flying in St. Louis.
I mean, I know we already talked about it, but West Sacramento, it always plays a good 20 degrees hotter than Oakland ever does at any given time. That was one of the reasons I didn't end up going up to Sacramento, is I couldn't convince my family to go to basically a minor league stadium that has absolutely no shade in it whatsoever and sit in the 95, 96 degree sun in the middle of the day. So, not everybody feels the same way that I do. I don't really care. But my 5-year-old probably is not going to do too well in that kind of environment. Right. So yeah, not as humid there. A little dry, but still extremely hot. All right. Well, let's talk about the pitchers who are going to take the rub of all this heat, Kevin, and who we might be avoiding that, and who we might be looking at right after this. All right, start off right away. Wins and strikeouts, 2-star pitchers, guys who can vulture a win, et cetera, et cetera. I love the names on here, so I'm just going to let you run with it.
One of them we already talked about quite a bit, David Festa. So we had that conversation. May not get the innings to qualify wins. We're a little concerned about the matchups, but they're not horrible. It's how deep he can go into games. That's who we were thinking of. That's who I was thinking of that got blown up at Great American Small Park, was David Festa, when we were talking about it later. So yeah, we already talked about him, but yeah, I'm moving Patrick Corbin, who can't stop talking about him, right?
He's
not
reason.
doing anything spectacular, but he just went to Minnesota, got us a win and 6 strikeouts. Sure, it came with what equates to a 5.4 ERA, but that's what I'm glad he only went the 5, right? Because 5.4 ERA sounds a lot worse than he gave up 3 earned runs and got me a win.
He hasn't let up more than 3 earned runs in any given outing all season.
Now,
if it only goes 5 innings, then
only twice has been less than 5 innings.
Yes.
And so we're riding Patrick Corbin, especially excuse me here. I lost my page. Especially as a lefty facing my Kansas City Royals.
Right, there you go.
I don't know that there's a better matchup than a lefty versus the Kansas City Royals right now. And that includes Rocky Road. That includes the Texas Rangers themselves that have been absolutely awful.
I think Washington is
But
another team in that bucket who hasn't really done much against
yeah,
lefties, but still, yeah.
I don't plan on watching the game on Wednesday. Let's put it that way. The Royals have had a hard enough time scoring runs at all recently, especially versus lefties. So absolutely love Patrick Corbin this week. I mentioned Rocky Road. Washington, these guys have availability. Jake Irvin, Michael Soroka, Mitchell Parker, Trevor Williams. I would throw any of them out there. Like I said that about the Rangers coming into this week, and at least on Thursday, that really would burn us. So be careful with that. And also, there may be no. All three of the guys facing the White Sox are rostered at this point. Liberatore earlier in the year, I think he's been picked up everywhere now, and Sonny Gray and Eric Fedde have been highly rostered for a while. So, but yeah, Patrick Corbin's my number one target starting pitcher this week.
Like, is your offense going to do anything? Sal Perez is like, I saw a comment is like Sal Perez hasn't found any power. I'm like, you look at his process plus chart, he's got plenty of power, just none of it's going over the wall. And so he'll run the other day. Of course, now you have Jacques out there as well. You would assume some power will come from that addition at some point or another as well, but it's hard holding your breath.
It really is. We knew Bobby Witt Jr. wouldn't perform as well as last season. Not many thought he could. I mean, that was just remarkable. But he's been even a little below what I expected. Maikel Garcia has been amazing. Vinny Pasquantino has finally come around. Since May 1st, Vinny has been better than what we were hoping coming into the season. April was so bad, it's still not showing up in the overall numbers. But since May 1st, Vinny Pasquantino has been amazing. Jock is hitting the ball hard, but hitting it on the ground a lot. So hopefully he starts lifting. But then so much disappointment. Jonathan India hasn't been anywhere close to what they were hoping. They just wanted a guy to get on base. That's all they wanted, and he's not doing it.
He's not doing the one thing. You got one job.
Yeah. And then guys like Maikel Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez, all these right-handed hitters, and they're horrible versus lefties. And so, unfortunately, I'll start any lefty versus the Kansas City Royals.
Man. All right. Well, this is out of order a little bit, but we did get a piece of news just come through on the offensive side. I figured I'd throw this in here before getting into the next category. For the Tampa Bay Rays, Ha-Seong Kim, who has been rehabbing, we kind of hoped or expected to see him back soon, at least sometime this month. He's been pulled from his rehab with, let's see, what does it say? A right hamstring tightness. Now, it's not having to do with his repaired right shoulder, so that's good. But it is going to put a little bit of a damper on his timeline. He'll be out 5 days and expected to resume rehab when he gets back. And he gets a new 20 days to do that rehab because of it. So maybe we don't see him by the end of June, but hopefully we still, he comes back by the middle of before the All-Star break. So Ha-Seong Kim, if you were expecting him, you're going to have to stash him a little bit longer. Maybe if you bid on him last week, hoping to stash him just for a week or two, you're going to be stashing him a little bit longer than that.
That's me.
Yeah, there you go. All right, get back into the categories here. Ratios, looking for an ERA or WHIP stabilizer. Who is on your radar this week?
A couple of guys. Always giving Rick Graham a shout out here. That's where I start. A couple I got from his article. One of them is going to be more expensive than we had hoped. That's Chris Martin, where he's available. Probably that more expensive with the chance that he could be getting saves. Brian Baker has been amazing in Baltimore. As Rick Graham points out, their best reliever, but he's not their closer.
Sure.
So he's available. Brad Keller, as the like seventh inning guy for the Cubs. We got a sub 2 ERA and right around a 1 whip in over 30 innings at this point. So, we're looking at a guy that's on pace for another 40 plus, maybe even 45 to 50 innings the rest of the way if he continues with these ratios. He always had great spin on his pitches, could never really put it together in long stretches as a starter. This might be Jacob Juna's former Royal that was very similar. When he left the Royals and they started putting in the longer relief roles even later in the game, performed much better than they did when they were in Kansas City as starters. So Brad Keller, he's available everywhere.
Yeah.
He'd be available in a 35 team league right now, I think.
Yeah, it's the curse of the name Keller, I guess, at this point.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, you mentioned Chris Martin as being a possibility for saves, but is there anybody else who's a little bit stronger of a reason to consider in that saves category?
We talked about Shelby Miller earlier.
Sure.
That's another one. I'm still intrigued about what we see going on in Miami. It's kind of tough to figure out there, but then I decide, why am I spending so much time on this? How many save opportunities do they get? And so, yeah, Shelby Miller is my number one guy this week with Chris Martin, as we talked, both guys we talked about earlier, who I'd be looking at if I'm looking for saves this week.
Yeah. I mean, you got to watch at least what's happening in Atlanta. Now with the obvious option of Krimble not being there, that, if they're going to make a move, whether or not they go lefty with Lee or they go Pierce Johnson or Iglesias returns to form and actually closes out the year. So always just a bullpen I'm watching all the time with bated breath to see if they actually show their cards at any point. So keep an eye on that one as well. All right, Kevin, I waited 2 weeks to hear this wild card section here. You mentioned one already earlier that wasn't written down, but you got another one written down here, and I've heard a lot of chatter about this one already. So, I wish in my daily moves league I needed an outfielder. I would have picked him up already. But yeah, he's going to be a popular ad this I think this Sunday.
Yes. And so this was the first name I wrote on this outline this week. And I wrote it down early Monday morning. And then I started seeing posts Monday and Tuesday. And then I've heard his name on every podcast the rest of this week. He's still a wild card,
sure,
but he may not be $1 or $2.
Not a secret one. No.
Jurickson Profar. He can start his rehab assignment on Tuesday, and then he's eligible to be back in 2 weeks, June 29th. So there was kind of a mixed bag of opinions in the offseason draft season about his draft price. I don't think there's anybody that would not want to pick him up if they're available on their waiver wire. But the debate was over, was he worth the price coming off of a career year? And then a PED suspension coming off of a career year. So he is the ultimate wild card because we know when he's eligible to come back. We know he will probably be back in the lineup that first day because Atlanta has been struggling with their outfield all season long. We have no idea how well he's going to perform. I am of the opinion that it will not be as good as 2024, but I think Jurickson Profar now at his age, I think he's a 20 plus home run bat with a decent batting average. And if he helps improve Atlanta's lineup and other players come around as well, the runs and RBI will be there. They've been there to an extent. Atlanta hasn't been as bad as they were last season, especially with Acuna back now. Yeah, I think Jurickson Profar. The question becomes, when I wrote this name down Monday, he was probably a $2 bid for me in $1,000 FAAB leagues. Now, how high do I have to go? Because, as you said, a lot of talk this week. I might be willing to go mid-teens, and I would think that should be enough in most spots.
Now, the other question is, where does he bat if he doesn't bat, he's not going to lead off, which he's batted lead off in the past. But obviously in Atlanta, Acuna is back. He's not going to bat lead off. Does he bat second or does he bat ninth? Because those are really the options in this lineup for Profar's like type, bat type. Maybe he bumps up to like seventh or sixth, but I almost rather him be ninth. There is not a clear opening at second in the lineup. Drake Baldwin's been there half the time, and then they usually use Austin Riley, bump him up a spot when Baldwin's not in the lineup, at least in the last couple of weeks. Where do you expect him to slot in?
I'm hopeful, and I really do think this is what happens. Of course, depending on the rehab games coming up. He has 2 weeks of rehab games that he's eligible to play in before he's eligible at the major league level. The way this looks right now to me is Eli White, is one of the guys that's going to get bumped here when Profar comes back, and I think you move Baldwin to that 8 spot and Profar right into the 2 hole. I really hope that's what happens, and I think it's very viable.
Yeah, and then the other thing to keep in mind for Atlanta, I mean, Atlanta still needs to clinch a playoff spot. So obviously Profar still has value for them in the regular season, but he's not eligible for the playoffs coming off of that suspension. So they can just drill him into the ground throughout
the absolutely can. It's a 3-year deal. First year, he signed a 3-year deal. I had forgotten that till I was looking up some news early in the week, and this is the first year of that $42 million deal.
Yeah, so get your money's worth, Atlanta. All right. Well, with all that in mind, Kevin, what other kind of tidbits of information or advice do you have for everybody after sticking with us for a good hour 40 in the middle of the day on a Friday? Thanks for those watching at home.
I think we had a lot of side notes where we were talking strategy throughout this episode. One thing I bring up quite often that I don't think we've talked about is not falling into just thinking we know what's going on. Dylan Moore was a good example. Losing his playing time, back to being a short side platoon guy. I didn't realize that till just a few days ago. And it's been going on for over 3 weeks now. The other thing is park factors. I know the reason we look at a 3-year rolling average typically for park factors is because they are so volatile. But I think now that we're nearly halfway through the seasons, it's worth at least looking. We did this last season and realized that Cleveland Ballpark was actually playing very well for power. And one that's really surprising right now, for right-handed hitters, Camden Yards is top 5 in home run park factors, right? And we knew they were bringing fences back in, but they didn't bring them all the way in as far as they had been moved out in the past. I think a lot of speculation was, this will help, but maybe not as much as some would hope. Well, it has. Camden, and as you said, East Coast gets really hot too. Camden Yards, before that fence was moved back, when it got hot in the summer, that was a target for home run hitters. It appears that could possibly be the case again. Seattle, top 10 for right-handed hitters in home run park factor. So something that coming into the season we did not expect. Once again, they're very volatile. I'm not just basing all my decisions on the Seattle so far this season has been a top 10 home run park for right-handed hitters, but it's something that would have been a deterrent for me in the past for maybe a borderline visiting right-handed hitter going into Seattle. It's not right now for me. So just things to double check your biases that we have that were based in reality.
Sure.
But our reality is changing with some of these ballparks from time to time.
Yeah, and the ballparks, the small sample park factors can play a bigger deal, especially in the near future. You don't have to rely on the 3-year rolling average of these factors when you are halfway through the season. Like, I don't care how the park factored in 2 years ago when I'm making a decision for next week or the week after in the season. So this is where small samples can actually play a decent role in making these decisions, especially in head-to-head leagues where you're just trying to win a week, or you're just trying to jump up a category or two, and you need to take as many of these factors into consideration when updating your lineups. All right, well, that was a lot, and I'm gonna do my best to get everything here up, published and edited, and we'll edit and published before Sunday. So hopefully everybody has enough time to listen to everything. And of course, I don't expect anybody listening to us on 1 speed. I expect everybody's listening to us on podcasts is at 1.5 speed. But with all that in mind and everything else, happy Father's Day, Kevin, to you and to everybody else who is or has a father or fathers.
Thank you so much
over the weekend.
Thank you for Uncle Ted and Droopy Dog hanging out in the chat today on this earlier time as well.
Yeah. Thanks for everybody out there as well. With all that in mind, anything else, that's going to do it for episode 218 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hastings. Thanks for listening. We bid you goodbye.